I'm sure most of you have faced this. You spend 5 minutes on Indian social media and you will see videos where, let's say, in the name of debate, they're shouting at each other about a law that came into effect about 40 years ago. The law I'm talking about is Section 498A. See, on the one side, people call it like it's a legal weapon for extortion, and on the other hand, they call it as a lifeline for dying women. I've heard multiple arguments going back and forth, pro and against this law. So I decided, as a newbie analyst, why don't I look into this? Is there some merit into all this shouting that is happening around, right? And when I started looking, I understood that while internet is so loud about all this, the courtrooms are absolutely silent because they are under the weight of nearly 1 million pending cases. If you take a look at this graph, Section 498A, the law against cruelty by husband or relatives, it accounted for over 42% of all IPC crimes against women in India. So just think about it for a minute, right? Nearly half of the entire workload of our judicial system regarding women's safety is tied up in one single law. So then this got me thinking, like, is this law actually delivering justice? Or is it just creating more and more victims? So I'm going to put aside all my emotions and look strictly at the data. So before we do that, right, we need to understand a little bit of the history, right? We have to go back to 1983. Okay, at this time, India was facing a horrific surge in dowry deaths, right? Women were being harassed, burned, and driven to suicide over household items or jewelry or whatever they thought was worth a woman's life. Needless to say, the existing laws then weren't enough anymore. So the government introduced 498A. Okay, it was a non-bailable and cognizable law, which means the police could arrest the husband and his entire family immediately upon receiving a complaint. It was a shield forged in a time of crisis. But over the last 4 decades, that shield has undergone some very weird transformation. I mean, the Supreme Court itself has called it legal terrorism in some instances, while others argue that weakening it would leave millions of vulnerable women with no protection at all. So, what does the reality look like? Let's look at who is actually getting arrested. When we talk about Section 498A, we immediately have this image in our head of a husband, in a lockup. But the data reveals a much broader and frankly more tragic picture. Because Section 498A doesn't just target the husband, it targets the relatives, mothers in law, sisters in law, even distant cousins. I mean, just look at these numbers, right? From the 2023 NCRB report. In just 1 year, over 1.7 lakh people were arrested under this law. Here's an interesting kicker. Over 36,000 of them were women. That is roughly one woman arrested for every 4 men. So, we are talking about tens of thousands of mothers and sisters who are being pulled into the criminal justice system, oftentimes based on a single written statement. So, if you think that this is just a men versus women issue, you're wrong. This law is increasingly being used to dismantle entire family units even before a single shred of evidence is presented in court. And let's not forget, in India, an arrest isn't just a legal procedure, it is a social execution. The culture of 498A has been criticized by the Supreme Court multiple times. I mean, in the famous Arnesh Kumar judgment, the court noted that the arrest should be an exception, not the rule. Yet, as you can see from this data, the sheer volume of arrests remains staggering. But then this begs a question, right? If so many people are being arrested, surely the conviction rates must be high, right? Surely the courts are finding these people guilty, right? Well, not exactly. So let's look at the courtroom reality now. In any healthy legal system, there is a strong correlation between an arrest and a conviction. Ideally, if the police is doing their job and the law is being applied correctly, the majority of cases should reach a verdict of guilt. I mean, that's pretty much how the system works, right? In India, the average conviction rate for all IPC crimes typically hovers around 64%. That is the benchmark for a functional law. Now let's look at Section 498A. Its conviction rate for 2023 was just 14.6%. I mean, just think about the gap between 64% and 14%. I mean, this is not a minor statistical deviation anymore. It's a systemic red flag. What it tells us is that for every 100 cases that reach a final verdict, 85 of those result in an acquittal. The system is working overtime to process cases that, in the eyes of law, simply don't hold up. Up until now, we've only considered percentages that account for cases that actually finished their trial. If you want to see the true scale of crisis, we have to look at the entire pipeline. This is the justice bottleneck. At the top, you can see the total number of 498A cases currently in the Indian judicial system: 9,05,927. Nearly a million families are waiting for a judge. But do you want to see how the funnel narrows? In the entire year of 2023, only about 60,000 trials were actually completed. I mean, at this rate, if we just stop filing new cases today, right, it would take 15 years just to clear the current backlog. And out of this massive pool of nearly a million cases, only 8,858 cases ended in a conviction. And this is where the real tragedy lies. When a system is choked with nearly a million cases, many of which are filed in the heat of a matrimonial dispute, right? What happens is the genuine victim of domestic violence is the one who suffers the most. Their case is buried under a mountain of paperwork. They have to wait a decade for justice that should have taken months. So I think in our attempt to make a law toothless no more, we've accidentally created a system that is too bloated to actually bite. So most of these discussions around 498A, it's usually presented with a false choice. I mean, we are told that we must either support the law as it is to protect women or scrap it entirely to protect families. But the data what we have seen today, it suggests a third reality. The current state of the law is failing everyone. It is failing the innocent families who spend a decade in court for a case that has an 85% chance of acquittal. And it is failing the actual victims of domestic violence because their cries for help are drowned out by a million case backlog. So then, what is the solution? Honestly, there is a strong case to be made that we don't need to revoke the law. Okay, that doesn't fix anything. But what we desperately need is to modernize it, right? Various legal experts and even the Supreme Court have already pointed that way. Firstly, we need to strictly enforce the Arnesh Kumar guidelines, ensuring that arrests are not used as a tool for harassment. Second, we need to make 498A compoundable. Currently, even if a couple wants to settle and move on with their lives, the law makes it incredibly difficult to drop those charges. By allowing legal mediation and settlements, we could clear thousands of cases from the backlog overnight. You see, at the end of the day, a law is only as good as its results. When a law results in 36,000 women arrested annually and a conviction rate that is 4 times lower than the national average, maybe it's time to stop shouting and start auditing, because justice delayed is justice denied. And right now, for nearly a million Indian families, justice isn't just delayed, it's stuck in a bottleneck. I think we owe it to every citizen, man or woman, to build a system that punishes the guilty, protects the innocent, and above all, it moves at the speed of truth. All the data used in this video is sourced directly from the 2023 NCRB report. You can find the links and the detailed breakdown in the description below. If you found this data-driven approach helpful, consider sharing this video to bring some logic into this conversation. Thanks for watching. Please share, like, comment, and subscribe.